No.
3, 2, 1, let's go.
Well, it was all, like I don't. I feel like this wouldn't work for people where there's only two participants. But I saw that some podcasts do like a clap sync, where they'll all clap in sequence, one after the other, and basically they know they're in sync if the order is correct and the gaps are like equal.
Yeah, but that's when people do that, they are recording their own individual audio.
Yeah,
Like that's what we used to do.
yeah. Why did you stop doing that?
Because I don't know, we realized that we never posted the podcast to audio only stuff, so there wasn't really any point in it having it be audio only.
Yeah, it's worked out much better this way, I reckon. See what else is working out. Our most recent news video is doing far better than gaming for the recently deceased one.
Even that, he put like effort into that.
Oh shit! Did he?
Yeah, he's got like a whole ass intro, which I think he used on some other ones.
What do you mean by intro?
It's got like it's like a news one, right? It's just a general like the globe spinning.
Oh, right, that's not bad. I was going to say because I don't honestly channel intros. I don't think are of any particular value, to be honest. But that's different. That's actually kind of neat, especially if you do like news. We should have that. We should have like a jingle. DRG news. That's it. That's the whole thing. I don't want to.
He played a character that's like a reporter, basically, and then he did like a little, like, I don't know, thing. Basically, he edited the video, and but it was that video that made me realize that that thing it looks most like a call log.
Well, okay, we're going to talk about this, right? So, first segment of the podcast, it's just always going to be Deep Rock News, where latest Deep Rock News is. Sometimes, though, obviously, the entire topic could be that. For example, next episode is going to be all about just us trying to piece together what exactly season 4 is. There's so much stuff that we've got, and it's just there's more than enough to talk about there, just all condensed into one. So I don't want to spend a ridiculous amount of time on this. Don't necessarily want to hold back either, but we're only going to talk about what we saw yesterday, which is, I mean, obviously the key art reveal is, like major, but it's kind of just an overall like season announcement. I feel like is the best way to put it, right?
Yeah, there's a reason why they pushed this teaser like harder than any others. Like they made an announcement on the Discord to watch that stream, right? That's why there were so many people there ready. Because they knew that this teaser is bigger and more important than all the others, essentially. And it is. It definitely is. Like, it gives us a picture, literally, on what this next season is, which it's about time, really.
I mean, it showed us a lot. It showed us it showed us a lot in terms of what's going to be in game. It showed us the date, release date, 15th of June, which is pretty, honestly, is kind of better than I expected. I mean, because honestly, when it comes to dates and sort of waits, I've like between updates, I have honestly started to expect the worst in terms of waiting and how long things are going to take. And I don't know if that's fair, but that is just how it feels. And just seeing like, okay, it's me, because obviously when we saw the roadmap, it was like end of Q2. So it's like, okay, technically they could release it on the 30th of June. And they'd still be correct. At least it's mid-June, literally mid-June, 15th of June. And, originally, I would have expected, because it's been this way, I think, for certainly all the season updates, we've got them on console, because we're console plebs, 2 weeks later. In this case, that would make that because we knew the main release date, 15th of June, from the last teaser, they had hidden it. Speaking of which, I don't know if they kept that stuff in. Right, they don't need to, obviously, but I don't know if those little teasers are still in the picture. Oh, they're not. I can see already off the box, the rocket boot box. Some numbers been scrubbed off, so that makes sense. But based on that, I thought, okay, it's probably gonna be June 29th. No, we're getting it on June 22nd, only a week later, which is incredibly better, especially because we do this as well. It's very helpful. It means we're not going to be as behind. Although we're only behind on sort of playing it and sort of giving our actual thoughts on the gameplay. still keep on top of it, patches and whatnot. I mean, we'll see if we can, because I mean, yeah, I know I'm not going to be here. I know I'm not going to be here where I am right now when Experimental Branch launches, unless it launches a week earlier, which would be a big favour in the world. Go ship, or a week later, even either one. It's really my schedule is like custom built to make that more awkward, basically. But yeah, this really does show us a great deal. Obviously, not everything, which is people need to understand that this is not everything that's going to be in the season. It might sort of be the main visual elements of all the main content, right? But it doesn't tell us like if it's a new mission type or not. It just shows us this new enemy that we can get as a boss.
We know there is a sizable fragment of this update that is hub-based, right? There's at least 2 hub-based elements that we know of. And obviously that's not in this teaser.
No.
There's definitely more than this single picture. But even then, I think, I'm not sure if you want to touch on this, but there is a bit of a disappointment brewing.
I've seen a little bit. I have seen a little bit, and it's
got quite a few comments of people on that video saying, "Oh, cool, Rockbox again."
Like, is that just us though? Is that just our viewers, or is that how general would you think that is?
I feel like it might be, just general takes, and that's just the ones I've seen it. I haven't actually looked at the Reddit if that's any different.
It's not like a. Well, I don't think it's definitely not unjustified. I am slightly surprised though. I don't know. I don't know if I'm surprised or not. I don't know how to feel about the fact that there are other people saying those kind of things, because I'm not saying those things. I can't say I'm disappointed, to be honest. I'm surprised at how happy I am almost that the Rockbox is still a thing. It's been continued because, and I feel like it would have been different if it was the same gap between season 3 and 4 as it was between season 1 and 2, like for obvious reasons. And it would have been if they weren't, working in all those holiday events. But season 3 needed a follow up more than season 1 did. So I felt like, do you know what I mean? I don't know if you agree, but you can see why that might be the case. Yeah, exactly.
I think Rivals were good enough from their intro, right? Like they didn't have a mini boss type enemy, but I didn't think they needed it. But then the next season came along, and that's like all they gave us as well. So it was like just filling in that small gap.
Well, here's the thing. I think season 2 was dictated by the weapons, and they didn't feel comfortable creating a new theme when they had to put all this effort into new weapons. And I feel like that might be just accidentally where sequels came from. They just had to continue.
I don't think that's the case at all. I think they knew that creating a new theme every season is gunning towards running out of ideas.
But I think they probably realised that afterwards, right? And I feel like season 4, I hope that it's them trying to actually put more effort into the fact that it's a sequel season, rather than season 2 just continuing because they had to, they had to do the primaries and then the secondaries. That was going to be 2 separate updates, and the next one was just going to tag along with it. The seasonal content was not going to get as much attention anyway, and because of the weapons, they couldn't put more effort into it. So that's why I'm expecting this to be better than both season 3 and 2, because if you discount the weapons, obviously you can't really compete with that in terms of equipment content, certainly. But if it can at least be a better sequel, because I feel like season 2 was almost a forced sequel, right? Because they just had to do more weapons. But season 4, they can go in a completely different direction. They can put all the effort they want into the seasonal content. And I feel like they have probably put more into it than season 3, or at least more gameplay content, certainly, because we're getting other new enemies as well. They're not just, Yeah. At least it's not just more grenades. I don't think it's ever going to be that, but at least it's not. And I'm just going to have to wait and see. I want to see what people think after it actually comes out as well. because
Yeah.
I get where they're coming from the start, but
I get why you can, like, I don't know, it's pretty finicky in that, like, you can be disappointed, like, right now, but it's not inherently reasonable since you've not gotten your hand on anything to be disappointed with. Like, you're disappointed with the stuff they've shown you, and they've clearly not shown us everything, right? So I think, I don't know, that's why there's like a bit of a wait a minute before being disappointed. But it's a feeling. You'll feel it whenever you feel like it. But
let's see, we got the name as well, which is Critical Corruption, which I did realise something. I sort of talked a bit of smack yesterday about the Plagueful, the look of the title, right? Do you remember? I was like, it kind of looked a bit boring, and this one is a lot more flashy. I realised I think Plagueful is actually the best title, though, right? Not that I think this title is bad. I just think, because I think Plagueful is better than all of the other titles we've had, because it's so... it's like 2 syllables, and it's also one word, but it's one word made up of 2 words at the same time. There's something about it where it flows so much better than any of the others. I don't know, I really appreciate that. Like, Critical Corruption almost doesn't feel like a season name. It's a bit weird, actually. At least, though, they didn't include the word plague. I think in some ways they are trying to avoid... They are trying to avoid what season 2 was for the rivals. I think I get that impression that they don't want it to be like the exact same thing, as in just as minimal. I don't think it will be. But we got to talk about the fella for a little bit. I mean, we have to. Because so there was a Steam post. It didn't reveal any new information. It sort of just acted as a more official announcement of the season, and they referred to it in general terms. They were like, it was like a question almost, like, what is that monstrosity they're fighting? And I sort of take that and use that word. I'm just going to call it the Rockpox monstrosity for now. Basically, it's a placeholder. Perfectly suitable name for it as well, if that's actually the case too. It's perfectly fine. Yeah, it looks pretty mean, and I'm definitely not disappointed with the actual design of this thing. I wanted to see something just ridiculous, horrifying looking again. Like it's I feel like the last time probably when we got new dreadnoughts, something I felt like quite like this, and I hope it's not too dissimilar. The assumption that it's a boss type enemy is not 100% justified. If you were to think of this as another season 2, then you might say it's probably going to be like the Nemesis again. In that vein, I would certainly hope not, because the Rockpox deserves its own boss, and this is clearly the number 1 candidate. And the one thing that we don't technically know, but it definitely looks like, and the one thing I want, is for it to be able to move. Which sounds trivial. I think it's a big deal, though. It really is. So. This is actually a word, by the way. Dictatorial. I think it's a word of the just dynamic of the boss fight, as in how. I can hear that. As in how dynamic it's going to be, literally, compared to something like the Caretaker. I really hope that what they're doing here is avoiding the shortcomings of both season 2 and 1, because season 1 was not free from shortcomings, and the Caretaker has proven to be one of its biggest. So we can only hope they're not repeating that.
And I think it's not even a matter of fact that stationary enemies are inherently worse than moving enemies, or bosses rather, better term, right? But I think it's just a matter of fact that we've had 2 stationary bosses in a row. So let's not do that again, right? Just like as a rule of thumb, don't do the same content again.
I mean, I would say sort of almost no matter what, they're getting at least one thing right. They're giving it an edge. The use of the lithovac and the lithofoamer against it, which is something we see, therefore it's something we know, is genuinely interesting. And I really appreciate that they're going that direction. Because not only that, just another way of fighting something that outside of your base kit. It's also just making sure that those pieces of equipment are not left unused. And I really respect that choice. I think I wouldn't want to leave them on, giving them a different use, a combat use, literally. Because I always saw it like looking at season 3, I always saw it like I feel like the Lithovac and Lithophoma should work against the Rockbox enemies almost. You should be able to like shoot the foam onto the grunts or the Praetorians, and then suck the blisters off, and it would kill them. Now that would probably for obvious reason that would trivialize the shit out of those mission types, right? Not mission types, out of those missions, because you have infinite ammo. So I don't know how they're going to handle that. I mean, I assume they're not going to change that. They're just going to make it so there's one segment where you have to do that, and then you expose it, and then you have to use your actual weapons. That's the natural assumption that I come to about it, and I think that's absolutely fair. But the last thing I want to touch on is things that people saying about it, trying to figure out what it actually is. Now, I feel like my immediate assumption, and I kind of just want to know where you stand on this in sort of a black and white way, whether or not it's and something that's been infected, or if it's like a pure Rockpox entity, as in like it's grown from a contagion spike, like just pure. I talked about it in the sense of like the Flood, like they have their pure forms.
Yeah, I want it to be a pure form, but I can't help but notice the similarities between it and a core.
Well, it's not just the Corlock. Now, the Corlock is the one that people have brought up. I mean, there's been multiple, right? This is what people have been doing recently. This was big point speculation that's just been picked up on, which makes perfect sense. Is not necessarily what it is. It's more so literally what it's built off of. People just naturally assuming that it's something that's been infected. Either way, though, I want to point out, even if it is that, it's still clearly gone a lot further than the other ones, because it's far less identifiable, which is already a plus, right? That makes it feel much more distinct as its own thing, even if it is something else that's been infected. And there's been Brood Nexus, which has been brought up, which is genuinely interesting, and the tentacles do look somewhat Brood Nexus-esque as well. Dreadnoughts have been brought up, as in it's like kind of like this weird like abomination where like a meteorite landed on a cocoon and it sort of turned into that, basically. And Corlock too, which is I would think is fairly reasonable. I think they're all sort of reasonable, speculations to make. And I don't know which one I'm more on the side of, because, and I am going to show you this. I apologise. This shouldn't affect the audio experience, but I kind of just want to show what Tyler we're talking about. I mean, he's probably seen this, I imagine.
Yeah. I haven't seen that exact thing. I just saw that, like the actual like it's like green tints as well on the edges, and they do look so similar. I don't even really care that much about like the root tentacle thing, whether that is there, but it's just that like even if it isn't a Corlock based or a Corlock taken over, it looks similar design wise to the Corlock.
Well, do you know what I want to point out? I want to look at the Corlock. Well, first of all, it doesn't look too far off a meteorite, right? That thing, right? Let's be honest. Yeah. That's kind of weird.
They have a pretty
look at that, and then look at that. Does that spell anything to you?
Yeah.
Also, these like vines, Rockpox doesn't kind of look like that. That's more vine-like. I don't know. I think there's a lot of credence to this idea. I also thought of was actually Breeder, which probably is not the case, but I just mean it's another option, shape-wise. Do you know what I really hope, though? If you look at this picture, the scale of it, right? If you look at the stingtail next to it, the stingtail's not small. Is it actually that big? Right?
It's not as huge as I would want it to.
Really, though, because how big can you really go? Exactly.
Stingtails are like Warden, and this thing is clearly very horizontal. Like it will probably be the tallest creature in the game.
Vertical, Tyler.
That's the one.
No, I do appreciate. I think it's definitely got that. Even if it's not as big as it looks here, it's going to have height on its side. I like how tall it is. It's kind of weird.
So it's definitely going to have that either way. But yeah, I wish it was like a lumbering giant rather than just kind of a normal giant.
Well,
But
what do you mean by that? I don't really.
just a giant so debilitated by its own size
Right.
that it's like I don't know, it can barely like move itself.
I mean
Um,
that does bring into question technical limitations, though. Like, it does. You can't necessarily have like a moving entity at that size, like necessarily. I mean, how a hitbox is handled. That would be really fucking difficult to figure out in terms of like, especially with like procedurally generated terrain. How it interacts with that at such a ridiculous scale is probably not easy. I feel like they're almost, even if this isn't as big as it looks here, I get the feeling they're probably going as big as they can go at the moment, or at least as big as they can go without it causing too much complication. You know, otherwise they'd have to spend a lot of
yeah.
time figuring out how it can actually exist in the caves. But there is one more option I want to point out, and obviously I mentioned people have the idea of it possibly being like a dreadnought, and it having landed on like a dreadnought cocoon or something. Okay, so they're right about the flaps thing, right? Because I didn't notice it first. You do have this sort of very distinct protrusion on the side, and you can see that it has one on the other side as well, as if it sort of like opens up, like outwards, which perfectly fits the core look. But I just want to point out exactly what these look like, these bits, and then show you a hive guard, and then show you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Either way, I just thought that was interesting because I think it does look a lot like these parts. So fuck off, wiki.
But I think once again, I think it is just that as far as um visuals go, they play the same thing quite often. And I'm depending on whether or not it's purpose, I might start putting this up as a bit of a criticism. In that we kind of played along with the fact that the meteorites look fucking identical to the Omeran. Um, like the exact same visual effect. Like same color, same kind of feel, like that kind of shit, right? Um, and the enemy look with this, it's if this is its own entity, it looks similar to so many other things, which is not great considering it's just I don't know, it's everything's starting to get a bit I don't know the word, it just look similar. Like,
Well, I feel like Deep Rock has a fairly defined visual language that's probably quite fragile, right? As in, if they went too far, it might be quite easy to break through that barrier and have it look like something that doesn't really belong. Um, and it's just sort of, like I said, it's like a visual language of the types of shapes that they tend to use, and it's almost inevitable, I think. Not that I wouldn't agree with you on that being criticism, but I also don't. I mean, it only looks similar to these things to me when you're trying to compare it. In my opinion, for me personally, it has a very distinct look. Just in general. In fact, it doesn't even look like, obviously it is a Rockbox thing, but it doesn't look like the most Rockbox thing in the world either. It's got a slightly different color scheme to it than the Rockbox. Its main body is sort of more grey than the brown they go for. I don't know. Also, that mouth is fucking terrifying too. Good lord. And does it have eyes? Because you said something about that. I mean,
yeah, those yellow dots.
but I mean, I do agree, but are they on the other side? I guess would be quite telling, or not. It doesn't necessarily need those. Um,
I do like the mouth though.
yeah,
That kind of
man.
mouth is something this game needed.
Well, that's what leads me to pure Rockbox entity because nothing quite has a mouth like that. People point out certain glyphs do, like the bulks of quite mutilated mouths, but nothing like that.
Nothing is that's just a circle with jagged spikes in
It was
it.
more tumorous. Reminds me of Carrion.
Yeah, it very much so does as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of something I wanted. Would have been awesome, like as its own thing. But if they want Rockbox to become that kind of entity, this looks much more fleshy than the Rockbox normally does. And that's why I'm just leaning towards pure entity. Either way, we don't know exactly how it's going to be implemented. People are assuming it's a boss, which I think is absolutely fair. I'm going to operate under that same assumption too. But how exactly it's presented in game is yet to be answered. Either way, that's the Deep Rock news. That's the Deep Rock.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have anything else to say about that, this fella, or any of it, really. Right.
Let's hope we actually see a bit of him before the thing releases.
We won't.
Probably not, no.
No. That's not usually how they do things. Usually, I probably should say it's being used a bit loosely there. It's not the only bit of news that we have, though. I'm not talking Deep Rock news. Next up is the gaming news of the week. And I don't need to spend long on this. It's just obviously something pretty significant happened in the past couple of days in regards to a fairly popular game, although maybe its popularity is not so high anymore.
It was waning already, and this was a shotgun.
Right, maybe I should actually get this off screen.
Yeah. The Overwatch 2 situation being, why is it Overwatch 2 anymore?
Yeah, so I just heard that they cancelled like in a PvE plan or something, and I just spewed it out to Tyler. So I sort of let him know about this, but I definitely don't know as much either. I definitely don't care as much either. But it's like they've scrapped the campaign though, haven't they?
Well, slightly opposite, essentially. Basically, the PvE mode was going to be the story of Overwatch, right? Because they have characters, they have a world, but they never really progressed story. And I think that's what they wanted to do with the PvE mode. Since they're Blizzard, and Blizzard also does like Diablo, they were going to add like a skill tree essentially, and like hero perks and kind of stuff like that. That was going to be like a whole part of it. It would essentially be like an RPG in Overwatch with like hero quests and stuff like that. So it like just does everything better. Essentially, the story part of the game with a cool skill tree and all that. They've scrapped like most of all of that. They've decided that either it's going to take like another couple years of diverting resources away from the main game to do it, or they just pull the plug and put all that resources back into the normal game. And people aren't happy with it because they pulled out all of the resources for the default game to work on the PvE. That's why Overwatch 1 died, essentially. They literally stopped working on the game for 2 years, then started working on Overwatch 2 for like a year, and then there's been like a year since Overwatch 2, and they were still been quotation marks working on the PvE.
Well, that's the thing though. If they actually were for all that time, then why would they drop it? As in, why would who actually develops Overwatch? Because well, I mean, like, is the actual developer of Overwatch? Because I mean, you've like
the main guy changed during Overwatch 2's occurring. I don't remember what. I think the first one was named Jeff, something else. And he was like the
Jeff
guy
Kaplan.
that did Overwatch. Yeah, he was like the pioneer, the guy that did like doing all that, and he was and then going into Overwatch 2, I think he either quit or got kicked out, either or. And someone else has taken up the helm. And I think either way, people are kind of quite liked both sides. They were both tended to be quite honest about the game, but probably not the case anymore because they're
Okay, so it's developed by Blizzard and published by Blizzard. It's straight up developed by Blizzard. So what I wonder is, a company like that who spent all this time and therefore money working on the PvE, why would that just be dropped? If assuming they've actually been working on that, so that means the work all gets thrown away.
Yeah, essentially, because they've clearly done so much of a botched job that it would take them about as much time as they've spent to continue to do it. Like, I think the
suppose that makes
thing
most
was
sense.
Like they worked like almost 100% into the PVE mode during Overwatch 1, right? They abandoned the main game and did all that. But then going into Overwatch 2, they started having to allocate more resources back into the base game. And doing that, they realized that to keep the base game alive, they need to add even more resources. And those resources would only come from PvE. And they realized that with the resources that they're running on, the PvE will never be done, essentially. I think was the
I
point.
can't. I honestly,
Um,
I can't tell if it's getting. I mean, I think it is getting harder to make games, but I'm wondering if developers are getting worse as well.
I,
Because like you
I,
look back to like AAA games of the past, and they used to come out, first of all, done with often with 3 major modes. You know, like 3 major
it's
gameplay
not
like
just that they're worse developers.
sections.
I think it's just harder to be one. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you like games. I mean, I don't think COD's a bad example at all. You would have a very fleshed out multiplayer. Would even have post-launch DLCs. There's a very fleshed out multiplayer from the start, like a full campaign, and then also you would also have zombies mode, and it's all finished from the start. And yet, the Overwatch devs, who should be some of the most not resourceful, have some of the most resources, um, should can't do more than one thing at the same time.
Yeah. And even then, though, I mean, yeah, they're not doing a particularly good job at the thing because with the announcement of calling it a day with the PVE, they also basically gave out a roadmap for the future, like a
Hmm.
pretty in depth for the next 2 seasons. So I think that season 5, season 6, they kind of stated what they're going to do, and then like season 7 onwards, and they put some other stuff there. Um, and people commented like considering this roadmap is essentially what they've traded in PVE for. Like this roadmap, like the things they put on it, on the energy and the resources that they can work towards. This roadmap should be a step up, but it really isn't. like this is the roadmap. It should imply that this is what the PVE is coming into. All these things are coming to the game. Get hyped,
So
and people are.
how much time or like how many updates does that roadmap cover?
2 seasons, and then it mentions the things that they would be probably doing like onwards.
Yeah.
Like it would say like detailed next season. See, I'm not even sure the next season. One of the next 2 seasons, we're getting a new support hero, um, and then they know that season 7 or beyond, they're doing tank hero and like a roadhog rework and shit like that. Like things that they know they've got to do, but wouldn't know when it's getting done. They put like season 7. Um, but then
Right.
other stuff. Like, and they talked about like events. Like it looks like there's going to be a fantasy type event coming next season because they've been doing stuff like that. I don't know if you saw it much, Harry, but there's currently they're in like a sci-fi futuristic space shit, right? With like the Emperor
Of course I
Sigma.
don't know. Of course I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. I think you might have seen it when they loaded it for a little bit, but
I
yeah,
mean,
currently,
I sometimes see things, but
yeah,
I know everything about what I care about.
yeah. They're doing like I don't know, funky events. Like they did like a Greek Odyssey one, now they're doing the space one, and they're gonna do like a fantasy one next season. And then the season after, so that'll be like season 6, they'll be adding what is essentially going to be the replacement for the PvE, um, which is just simple content that's story related. It's stuff that they already do for story. Like this is like a thing they do on holidays where you basically do go through like a PVE thing anyway, right? It's like a Halloween event. You have to kill a bunch of PVE robot zombies, and fight some PVE characters, stuff like that. That is essentially what the future of the story quests is going to be. Which nobody was hyped up for that part really. People were looking forward to the actual gameplay additions, which is what they're removing essentially. Like they're yeah. So no one's everyone's unhappy. The fan base is probably tearing itself to pieces. Actually, I don't even know. I mean, probably a lot of the smaller ones, but I know because I watch a YouTuber that plays it, and he's just just so used to it at this point.
This is one of
Like,
the reasons why I was so determined to not become like doomer YouTubers for Deep Rock, right?
yeah,
There was a small phase that there's at least 2 podcasts that were like really bad. Like
yeah,
but I wanted to get out of that because frankly I think that level of disappointment and pessimism about Deep Rock was somewhat dishonest, or maybe not even dishonest but probably unjustified. It's also just like I do just hate how much of an industry video games are now as opposed to an art form, and I can't deny, given like the size of Deep Rock's development team and sort of how they do things, that for them it is more of an art form than an industry. They treat it more like things used to be, even if you can still draw parallels. They're clearly not driven by. They're just not driven by money. They're just clearly not. So
yeah.
I have no
I
intentions to treat them like people like Blizzard, and I won't.
Yeah, and I think you got to like kind of compare the two as well. In that, like, people are complaining and being like upset about we're gonna get Rockbox again, and it's like, how can you look at that compared to like what Overwatch is getting right now, right? Like, oh no, we're getting content, like, but not the content I want. I'm disappointed.
Yeah, but how
And
disappointed
then
are they really though? That's what I mean. Like, because it's not you. I don't. I'm not gonna like. I can't really condone just. You shouldn't. Deep Rock isn't absolved of criticism just because it's worse games, right? I mean, I know you know that, but yeah, I'm not sure what to make of that specifically. I think you're allowed to be disappointed still, right? Are you not?
it's like, sure, but like, what's the point? Like,
I
being
agree.
disappointed before the game even comes out is so stupid inherently, but you're gonna do it anyway. But then, literally, if you rear your head slightly outside of the Deep Rock like verse, you will see how good we've still got it. Like you have to actively only pay attention to Deep Rock and not like Rockbox just for some reason to be disappointed.
Yeah, to feel like
It's like,
Deep
at
Rock's
that
going in
point
a
you
bad
earn it.
direction, you really need real tunnel vision, and I feel like that might be where we were when we made some of the more doomerish videos, right? Well, we weren't really thinking about anything other than Deep Rock, but and also it's even if you are just thinking about Deep Rock, I feel like you can still be more optimistic than that. I mean, a lot of people certainly are, maybe too optimistic, or not even optimistic, just too complacent. Either
Yeah.
way, I mean, we were sort of worried that about them possibly doing more Rockbox, but I don't think it was like unjustified at all. And I do think this is probably where things are going as well. Deep Rock, I think, is probably going to be sequel seasons. That seems, unless they change things up in another way, as in the actual, unless they change the
there is
seasonal model in any way, I feel like it's going to be these kind of things. But I still think they're trying to avoid the part 1 and part 2 thing a little bit still, even if they're
yeah.
continuing the theme, right?
I think that's the thing. People only it took like until less than a month before the season comes out for people to realize they're getting Rockbox again, right? That is so different to how they treated season 2. Literally, the first thing we knew about season 2 is that it's rivals again. Because the first thing we got was the title, Rival Escalation, right? It literally immediately we knew it was Rivals Part 2. But this time, they literally waited until the last possible instance to
Yeah.
show us that it's Rockbox
They
again.
actually didn't show us. For example, you take the Monstrosity or you take the Rockbox Scoo Bomber. They didn't show us either of those things in teasers. It was the key art that showed us that when we first got that, which is kind of interesting. And oh shit, what was I going to say? It's like, because we talked about how, I mean, I never like straight up agreed with you, but you sort of said how it might be a good idea for sequels to actually be more spaced out, which I think could still work, but at the same time, I don't think they would want them to be too spaced out, you know? So I feel like just having them right next to each other actually works better for when they develop things. But I still think there is something to be said here, and it's going to sound like I'm saying the same thing again, like just, but I'm not. Like, season 1 and 2, that's like part 1 and part 2. There's a difference between part 1 and part 2 and a sequel. Do you know what I mean? Like, because you could take like the Lord of the Rings, for example, the films. That's a trilogy. That's like part 1, part 2, and part 3 of a trilogy. Um, and honestly, best example of the other thing I can think of is actually just off the top of my head, Deadpool. Right, you take Deadpool 1 and Deadpool 2, they're different films, but it's still about Deadpool. But it's like it's a different story. I mean, I don't know if that's necessarily the direction they're going in, but I mean, inherently just changing the name of the title, not including the word plague is already kind of telling of that. That they don't want it to invoke the exact same feelings that Plagueful did. They want it to feel different to Plagueful, even if it's still continuing the Rockpox narrative.
I feel like if they really want to push that like a step further, they should kind of like itch the quasi quarantine stuff. Um, they got like masks and like all that like hand sanitizers out.
It should, yeah. They should
They
go
might
more.
want to use that.
They should go more like space zombies and less like space infection. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's a difference between
Yeah,
like more
it,
like
it,
more like the feeling of like a zombie film rather than like COVID.
yeah. Like instead of having these like really tonic vials and like these like the things that the rock pops in like the
More
containers.
apocalypse than pandemic.
Yeah,
Maybe.
pretty much, yeah, exactly that. And like instead of the vials will be like smashed in the hub, essentially, right? Like shit like that. Like it's not a sterile environment anymore. Shit has gone further than that. Kind of feeling.
Yeah. Well, I mean, all that out of the way, and I don't know if we really want to touch on Overwatch again, but we might because of what comes next, which is the main topic, um, which is actually another very very good game, uh, by name of the Roboquest or just Roboquest. Um,
Yeah,
I need to like look at who it's actually made by. I want to because I still don't know. I'm on the website right now, and
yeah. Well, I know the YouTube channel. We subscribe to it.
we who's
Yeah,
we?
well,
Yeah, but that's not like my YouTube account. Anyway, RoboQuest is is developed by Rise Up Studios. There we go, got it. And I know it's like first of all, I want to thank one of our viewers, Monkey, for introducing us to this game. Unlike say Pizza Tower, which we still haven't played, we probably won't. So
just so you know, we actually have more subscribers than the Rise Up Studios YouTube channel.
we have more subscribers than the RoboQuest Reddit.
Yeah.
That's scary. Which I guess not, but this is the thing about this game. This is why it's sort of a bit weird making a video on it, which I absolutely don't mind. And I'm sort of thinking about where it might crop up again. I know when it's going to crop up again, at least 2 separate times as actual videos. But until then, so you're gonna focus on it as it is now. It's a rogue light, and this is sort of like a genre that I still don't quite understand. The difference between roguelites and roguelikes, right? So Binding of Isaac is a roguelike, right?
Yeah.
And then Hades is a roguelite. The difference is, right? The difference, as far as I understand, is what you go in with, right? As in, roguelites are the only ones where you can change the stuff that you start with.
Yeah, roguelites is like you have upgrades that make the game progressively easier, I think, like, as you play. Like if I had to guess. Because that is the thing. Binding of Isaac, you get different characters, but that's it. Right? You don't get the game doesn't get easier the more you play it, like technically. Right? You don't get upgrades that slowly makes you stronger. The other characters aren't even inherently stronger. Although I think Azazel is. He is strong as fuck. You start with flying. That is OP as hell. But that's not the point. I hope I got the name right because I did play it a lot. But
Azazel is a character from like that sounds right. You know
yeah,
what I mean?
he was basically a demon who could like starts flying, but he also has like a really
Oh,
short range
honestly, I
shot.
think it could actually be Azazel or Azrael. I think they're both
One of them,
could be
yeah.
both of those.
But point is, yeah, that game you get your characters, but then like that's it. It's based purely on luck and skill in the game. You don't get like that kind of stuff. But going off by the fact that this is a roguelite, Hades is a roguelite, like known. Like they both get easier by playing more because you get more like skills, and you it's legitimately easier. You gain more health, you gain more things helping you out, that kind of stuff. Um,
I think you do genuinely have a lot more control as well. I mean, Hades not as much as in Roboquest. I feel like you can diminish the randomness quite a bit. I feel like. You know what I
a
mean?
lot.
Especially once you get the ability to start with a perk, right? Because then you can immediately, and especially once you can start a perk and you have you also start with 3 perk rerolls, right? You can immediately set yourself on the path that you want to for like your build, and you're always probably going to find a weapon that really suits you before sort of like the later stages as well.
I think
Um,
that's like another thing as well though, is I mean this might not be further, but like Binding of Isaac doesn't have that at all. Your build is based purely on the things that you pick up. Meanwhile, Hades and this game, you would get the Daedalus hammers, right? Or like stuff along those lines. I'm actually a bit rusty on Hades, I don't quite remember.
well,
But
I
you
think it's interesting that this has like
the boons.
levels, and I don't know how much levels is like a thing in roguelikes or roguelikes because like Hades, you don't level up as you go, and that's sort of I suppose that's the difference.
Oh no, I think because Hades, right, Rise Up. No, Roboquest has levels because you then get perks when you level up.
Yeah.
Hades, you would just get the boons of the gods, right? That's kind of that thing. It's to consistently give you abilities that make you
Well,
stronger.
I sort of see I guess Hades sort of blurs the line there because also I don't know if it does because RoboQuest is also sort of like and I don't know how common this is in roguelikes because like I said Hades doesn't really do this, but you know, RoboQuest is a looter shooter as well, in my opinion. I don't know if that's like correct, but don't see how it can't be. You get like weapon drops, and like looter shooter thing is like mixed. All the weapons are like a mixed match of like different parts and whatnot, and all of these like prefixes, in this case affixes, very similar to Borderlands. Also very similar to Borderlands in look. um, and it works actually. The cell shading actually very much so works. It feels a lot like Borderlands, in that sense, which definitely aids it. I think I actually really like that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was thinking about the difference between it and Hades in the sense that instead of weapons in Hades, you do get the boons, but I suppose the boons are also similar to perks in Roboquest at the same time. Like Hades, you choose what weapon you start with, and that's the one you have the whole time. But you also get, you get boons, but you also get Daedalus hammers. You sort of have different types. In
yeah.
Roboquest,
Well,
it's just the upgrades.
With Hades, picking your weapons is essentially picking a character. Like that's
That's like your class, yeah.
yeah, because you always play as Zagreus, or not in the new one, obviously, but
Whoa, go broke. What? Sorry.
yeah, um, yeah, you play as Zagreus, but then how Zagreus plays is different. With these ones, I mean, in RoboQuest, you play the same looking guy, like I think he's built the same, but he got a different color and then different skills essentially. And generally speaking, what weapons you use doesn't really make a difference. Like,
No,
you can use any weapon and do any build really with like any character. Um, I mean, because there
pretty
are some like,
much.
universal skills. Like if you want to spec into elements, you can probably do that with every class, right?
Yes.
Um, like the one that just turns your weapon into a certain element and stuff like that. There might be a certain type of robot that's like built better for that. But generally speaking, yeah, it's like guns. You spec into either skills or guns, or have them cross over, and that becomes like Giga Strong. It's
Well,
kind of that
yeah. I
kind of
mean, but honestly, like when it comes to like specific weapons that are like suited to the class, there's really only 2 classes that have that, and even then, it's not that hard. And it's also only specific upgrade paths as well. Like the commando can get more out of explosives, and not all weapons use explosives, but some do. I mean, some weapons that don't start with explosive can have explosive affixes too, so that helps as well.
yeah.
And then the Ranger gets a lot out of weapons in general, actually, if you go down the crit path, but that's also more specifically weapons that tend to have crits more often, which is like the crossbows and the snipers. they tend to go more for crits, and that's a genuine perfect take.
Not even
Probably
that
the
you
best
have.
one on Ranger as well. No, you don't even have to. You can just increase like crit chance just naturally
So,
through other
yeah.
means. Yeah, some. And I was thinking about this as potentially. I'm not. I don't know if criticism is the right word, but there's. As in, I'm not going to start by calling it criticism, but it's like. It's like weapons and your upgrades are kind of separate things. They sort of have their own journey throughout the run, I think. But I
Well,
don't know how bad of a thing that is either.
I mean, you know how I play it. Literally, I don't pay attention to my weapons at all. Like, I genuinely, I literally on the run the other day, albeit we didn't win, but I got to like the second boss with the default pistol in my hand, right? Like and honestly, it was a really strong build nonetheless. It probably obviously depends on the
Were
character.
you were you
But
recon? Were you recon? Because
yeah, I was
yeah,
recon with
recon's the
the
one who is the most not weapons, not guns focused. You know,
yeah.
because he's
I
like
mean,
inherently got stronger melee that you can always use.
he's not though either. I mean, actually, no, he kind of is.
Well,
His
both the guardian and the recon are the ones that have the melee actual melee
yeah.
attacks that you can always
The,
use, right?
the
The others all have
recon
cooldowns.
the recon is pretty hard, like built for the melee, like more than Guardian, because everything recon whenever he uses the melee or teleports builds charge towards the melee to get like a giga attack. So even if you aren't supposed to always be meleeing, you're supposed to do it every so often to at least like gain like a giga crit, like essentially like a backstab effect, I imagine. Um, which yeah, so he is the most melee because he can also, like teleport in to get to them, melee them, stun them, and all that.
Yeah,
So, albeit, yeah, I play the character that doesn't wire gun most of the time,
yeah.
and even then, there are guns that suit not using guns, right? Like the turret gun, which I quite fond. Just throw down a turret and then I go in, and the turret just
Well, I
slowly
mean, are
goes
there
off.
any others though that are that? Or is it just that one?
Yeah, I mean, you obviously like that's the only one that I would then like gain benefits from without needing to use it. But there are weapons that I could still be using in that, right? I would still just use shotguns if I felt like it, right? Like as I'm closing in the range with the melee weapon, I would shoot the shotgun and get them low or kill them
Yeah, I
just
mean, I
straight
don't
up.
know where I'm at on the shotguns though, because like, that's the thing. I don't know what. Not all of the weapons feel amazing. They all feel pretty good to shoot, and it always feels pretty good to hit stuff. But when you sort of need to actually do well, um, I don't find the average shotguns to be like. I like the blast shotguns, so I like that sort of weird little line of weapons, the blast ones, where they're all like sort of a bit more high tech and they all like ricochet as well. And like the blast shotgun, like much higher fire rate than pretty much any other shotgun. I
Yeah,
definitely like
I'm not a
that.
huge fan of like the sawn offs or granny shotgun, anything like that.
Well,
That like,
that's the area. That's the area of weapons that I'm not big on. Right, I'm not a big fan of the sawn off shotguns and the grandma shotgun too, and most of the sort of explosive stuff as well. I don't like the mortar or the like the thumper, those kind of things. I like all the other stuff. I like pretty much all the rifles. I like snipers and all the crossbows and stuff. I like all that stuff like a lot, and it usually suits me more anyway. But what I was saying a couple of minutes ago about your like upgrade path and your weapons almost having like a separate journey throughout the playthrough is the run where we beat it, or at least beat what's currently there, and we'll get into that. I was engineer, right? And engineer, I guess engineer is a bit interesting because you can't really rely on your abilities that much as engineer. They're not going to do everything. Engineers sort of you got to. I guess it is like Deep Rock in that sense. You've got to use everything that you have, but you're ultimately probably going to be more consistently powerful than the other characters, other classes. But the sort of the upgrade path I went down was purely just the not even like more drones and making drones more powerful. It was purely defensive. Like I had things that gave the drones more shield, and also gave me shield. Also made like the drones attract enemies more effectively. It was all stuff like that. And I just had one legendary LMGs with me that I just upgraded whenever I could, and that was sort of how I did it, and that just worked out. Which I think was pretty fun, and I feel like it can work out in a lot of different ways as well. You don't really need to. go hard in any particular way. I suppose what I haven't really done is just like a completely elemental one where it really is just focused on the guns. I haven't really done that because it's always more attractive to do things that are like
I
class specific, you know.
That was actually in the end that was the build that I used when we won.
Oh,
It was literally it was I think I was still Guardian, but I really wasn't using Guardians. Well, I used a Guardians thing, which I never used before. Literally, I used like the two perks that I've never touched in my life, or like two perk or skilled trees. One of them I didn't get much of. One of them like boosts the effect of my passive. That's like more damage for like the first couple shots. I didn't really feel that. Didn't really like it. But the other one is what started the build, and it's like every like 2 seconds, I would shoot out two electric shots that would like shock, and I'm like fuck it, shock time. And I spec so hard into shock that I literally, I mean, it's like tasering bosses, like like
yeah.
they'd be like shut down mid fight and like mid attack, and like constantly. And it was just I had like a sentry as my secondary that did shock, and then I had a shock rifle on my primaries that shocked. I did have like my burst homing explosive SMG thing, which I forgot the name of, which I really like. That adds shock before I switched it out. And then yeah, literally it just dominated. Like shock is so fucking strong that yeah, that carried me pretty hard. Um,
Well, where
and
you at on the elements? So, because I remember you saying a lot about how I think like cryo is like shit.
as far as I can tell, I see no reason to bother with anything other than shock. Cryo slowdown effect only works if things move, and I don't see the appeal with slowing them down. It doesn't seem or doesn't say if it does any more damage when they're frozen. So as far as I can tell, completely useless essentially. Fire does damage, which is always nice, but I have interacted with it so little. I don't know about you, but like there is like only like one two weapons that I can remember. Like there's the fire cannon and like the crisper or whatever, the
Kramer.
Kraber.
Yeah, I like
That's
that. I like the Kramer. I don't know why it's
it,
called that. I don't.
yeah, it's like those two weapons are the only thing I've seen like set enemies on fire. And obviously, I think there's probably about that many of the other weapons as well. Like ones purely based on dealing the status
What's also the
effect.
fire gun that looks like a little horn? You seen that one?
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
But there's probably about that many of all of them. But for some reason, with like the affixes, I have only ever gotten cryo or shock on them. I've never gotten a normal gun that sets things on fire.
That's really weird. I get those a lot. I get
Right,
those.
but
That was my legendary LMG that I used when we won. That was that had burn on it. That burned enemies.
yeah,
So that's weird
I
that you haven't
mean,
got that. That feels way. That feels like significantly. Like that feels especially like the most common thing for me. Getting
yeah,
weapons that
I've
burn.
literally I've burnt people all of like twice with
People.
like the flamethrower or the robots, like all of like twice, and that was with guns that like are supposed to set things on fire, not affixes. And as far as I can tell, the damage gained is all right, but I don't know. I think generally killing things is good enough just with the shots or your skills. Fire doesn't seem to be playing that big of a role. Meanwhile, stunning, and not just stunning, because obviously there is stunning, like jumping on things' heads and like meleeing them. But like, actually, I think those are called like something else. I think being shocked or being electrocuted is actually called stun. Like when something has stun, it's got the purple, which is the electrocuting color. Um, that thing is just so fucking strong. Literally, it's just there is a shit ton of enemies. I throw all the shock I can at them. The entire enemies are shut down. I then do whatever the hell I want because they're all vulnerable and easy to kill. Meanwhile, they would either be slowed down, which wouldn't affect them if they're a turret, and barely affects them if they're not. And especially if they're a boss, it does like nothing. Um, or I set them on fire and it might kill them, but you know what else will kill them? Me just fucking shooting them, which is pretty easy to do since it's infinite ammo. Um, which I forget
Oh
until I
yeah,
just said it just then.
that's a good
Always
point.
cool when there's infinite ammo in games like that.
It is nice. It's just like fuck it. Here you go. Like just don't worry about it, bro. Just don't worry about it. I
Yeah,
kind of
that's
appreciate
not
that.
that's not part of the game. Which shit on Overwatch all you want. Which I'm sure everyone that is currently don't have to worry about ammo in that game because it's always annoying
No.
in like COD when you're just running and gunning and then you're out of ammo. but you can just run and gun casually on Overwatch and on Roboquest.
I mean, Titanfall
So
did that. Let's point out Titanfall. It was like it's a COD style multiplayer in a lot of ways. You load out all the weapons you could choose from, but you have infinite ammo. It's as simple
yeah,
as. It's just nicer usually. It really is. I mean, Halo's a little bit different in that sense. You don't. It's a completely different type of style of shooter. But yeah, I was thinking about the classes in general, and we sort of have like a pretty clear divide. I feel like that I immediately noticed, or pretty early on, like even before we got unlocked engineer, because there's 5 classes, right? So come on, Deep Rock. No, none of that. No, no, we're not going to do that. But there's 5 classes. There will be 6 eventually. I don't know if they're ever going to do more. But we got, and actually, I think these classes are kind of. I find these classes really interesting because honestly, some of them, well, really only 2 of them are like really like generic. You know what I mean? And it's really just I suppose they all fall into certain archetypes, but there's something about them that feels a little bit more a little bit less stereotypical in how they actually play. You've got like the Guardian, which I guess is like a common thing, kind of, but I don't know how much
Guardian.
I don't know how often that name comes up. No, because the generic ones I was thinking of in name was Ranger and Engineer, right? Because
Yeah,
those class names come up quite often. But the others not so much. And like Commando, I find especially weird. He feels like the most ill-defined one. He's kind of just, I don't know, just
yeah, because
weapons.
as mentioned, it's like none of them really spec into like a specific like weapon type, right? As mentioned, like well, none of them spec into an element, like because normally you would have that in games with elements and classes. There tends to be classes that are better with certain elements. Um, I mean, if you want an example, like Tiny Tina's Wonderland, there are classes that spec into a status effect, like dark magic. That'd be the dark magic class essentially, um, and that kind of thing. But it doesn't really have it except for explosions, like which I guess it's not technically a status effect, but it is like a weapon type generally speaking. So it would kind of influence your weapons and decisions like that,
Yeah,
which is
but even then it doesn't have to because it's not. It doesn't. The commander doesn't inherently have like explosive bonuses. That's just a path you can take. You know,
yeah,
that's actually not inherent. And what I think is really cool because like it's a little bit dense sometimes, right? Like the passive effects they have, right? I don't think about them too much, but I still find them pretty cool. Like you don't really have to think about them if you don't want to. You can just focus on your 2 main abilities. But the passive effects are also pretty neat, like especially for Ranger. That's like a big part of Ranger is that because that's how you get the crits,
I
like the
think
best
they
crits.
we probably should talk about Ranger specifically a little bit because he is the most recently added character to what we can
I didn't.
gather.
I didn't know that actually. I mean, I guess like we shouldn't have assumed it was engineer. Something about engineer is still a little bit like
Oh,
new,
yeah.
but that's weird because like engineer's also on like the loading screen as well. It's like Guardian and Engineer are like the 2 ones that are
Yeah, but
pushed.
that isn't like the newest stuff, I don't
No,
think. But like the winter update, because I watched the video covering it on YouTube, so it's basically them going through all the stuff that they added. Um, and yeah, basically, uh, Ranger's ability, like that was what Recon had essentially. He used to have the going invisible thing. So that
he's still
ability
got
isn't.
like a remnant of it, doesn't he? You can still get the decoys, can't
Yeah.
you? Yeah, there's something there.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, so Recon has like no Recon Ranger. My issue there is they both are R's and they are very similar. So
Yeah,
there's a bit of issue
and they're
in.
very similar. Like not even like by mistake. You know.
Yeah, they moved an ability from one over to the other. Um, and I think that's it is what it is. I think maybe they thought they could do some interesting things, and I think in all fairness, Recon hasn't not benefited from it, right? Like Recon teleporting is still pretty fine and pretty cool, which is what they obviously had to give him because they moved his thing over, so they had to make him one. So while Ranger didn't technically have a new ability, Recon got one. Plus, Ranger then had the javelins, which they would have had to come up with.
Javelina.
And so that's like the newest thing class-wise they did, like on the winter update. I think they did probably tinkered some of them other things. But according to Monkey, who was in communications with a dev, Ranger is kind of OP. Like, or at least it's kind of the meta pick, it seems.
Yeah.
So, game's not perfect in balance, but still generally, I think.
Well, but also it's like I'm thinking about the balance thing. It's just like it almost feels like it matters even less than something like Deep Rock.
It feels like something like it does feel like Borderlands, but done slightly better. In the
Which Borderlands?
all characters can be OP, right? Build them well enough, they can all become gigafuck OP. Some of them become gigafuck OP easier,
Yeah.
quicker.
You could, I mean, maybe we could draw comparison to like the Hades weapons though, because honestly, I don't think I've ever had the spear feel OP. I'm going to keep it real with you.
One weapon I never beat the game with,
and the sword is also not quite there. I feel like the one that was like always easiest for me to make feel OP was actually the bow, which is kind of weird, because of the last aspect. But then like the fists are probably the best like from the get go. I know that. There's no denying it. I didn't even think about that though, because we talked a little bit about this yesterday. Tyler's just chronic attraction to melee builds or classes in games with lots of ranged options, right? There's sort of like a very, very distinct trend here. And okay, so you would have played Borderlands 2 the first time after Deep Rock, right? It's not you never played it before, like even like a little bit for Deep Rock. So I'm just thinking, did this start with Deep Rock? The melee thing. You think it started with Deep Rock with Driller?
Probably not. I think it started in COD, because I like Riot Shield meleeing.
This has always been a thing. Then this is literally just instilled in your DNA.
It's just a thing that I just kind of occurs and that I've noticed about myself. That when in games with guns, I will pick a melee weapon. I don't really care what melee weapon it is. I just like meleeing. But in a games with melee weapons, like generally more melee, like in in Hades, there are still like swords and spears.
But it's like it's the most. But even then though, you do have the gun and you have the bow, and even in the sword, and then the sword and the spear have ranged attacks inherent to them. You picked the most. You just automatically went to the most melee thing it had. Even then,
because in games with like weapons, I then pick fists. That's kind of how it goes. Like
and I guess Deep Rock, would you call Deep Rock a bit of a fists thing as well? Because it's the two drills on the separate hands.
Essentially, yeah, but it's also essentially the only melee thing. But yeah, double bonus. Probably why I love the drills probably more than they did. Well, they don't more than they deserve.
No. They really do deserve the love. Yeah, and then I was just thinking like it was like there was Hades and then because Hades was one I just realised, but it was like you started with Deep Rock, you just automatically went to Driller, and then it was like Borderlands Krieg, right? Krieg is the one who doesn't rely on weapons at all, and then I guess unless I'm missing something, and then it was this actually. Straight up.
Roboquest, and then we played Gunfire Reborn, which we might do an episode on.
Maybe. I don't mind comparing it now.
Well, that's another reason to talk about it.
Yeah. All right, go on. What are you going to say?
Yeah, that one as well. Essentially, I pick a turtle melee guy that goes around, like dashes towards enemies and beats the shit out of them. But yeah, basically, I have a preference. And as far as this game is concerned, it essentially means that I only really play Guardian and Recon because the other three don't have melee abilities, which I find weird, but not so weird because I've seen it before.
Yeah, I think the only one, the one that sort of irks me a little bit is, because I actually really like Engineer, but Engineer's secondary ability, like that slot, is a bit generic. It's literally just like a single little explosive blast. It's kind of just like a weaker version of the Commando's rocket.
Yeah, although
That's pretty. I
according
mean, I
to
don't know where you're
Monkey,
at on engineer though, because I remember before we unlocked engineer, I realized there's already like a pretty clear divide. And it was like, not that it surprised me that you gravitated towards Guardian and Recon as the more melee focused characters. But it was also that I distinctly, divorced from that, liked Commando and Ranger more than the other two. You know, I naturally went towards those guys. And then Engineer came along, and Engineer is probably in like the same boat for me, but that means there's probably a bit of an inequality because, as far as I know, you don't particularly care for Engineer either,
no, not
right?
really. No,
That means it's like
no.
3-2. It's not like
Yeah.
I've got like Ranger and Commando, and you've got Guardian and Recon, and then Engineer is like the middle ground. No, you just stick with Recon and Guardian.
Yeah. I mean, if anything, the Hunter is probably the middle ground, not Hunter, Ranger. Since while still not melee, the javelins weren't bad when I used them. They could be used in melee because my thing is cooldown was like like engineer and the one bombardier fella. They both have like cooldown on their quotation marks melee
I
attack.
feel cool. I
Not
feel the cooldown on Commando the most. He's the most cooldown heavy. Both of them have cooldowns. But like the Engineer is like you can have your like the drones up all the time, and even that ability is on a cooldown. When it comes back, you can just use it to heal them up. Well,
Yeah.
And then Ranger's main ability still has cooldown, but then the javelins do also recharge. By the way, the javelins you can pick up, but they'll also automatically be picked up after like a few seconds.
But if you're only ever throwing them close range, you're picking them up instantly and throwing them again instantly. So it's like a quasi melee, which is why Ranger is probably my 0.5. If we were to split it that way, it is more like that. But then I wasn't a huge fan of Ranger just because I don't know, it wasn't a good build. I probably ended up with, but yeah. So if you see this Rise Up Studios with a R with a Y,
Yeah.
who is a indie studio based in France.
Oh dear, I didn't know about that.
It's-
No, that's not. Sorry,
it's
no, don't worry.
It's fine. We're
You know.
British. It's part of a stereotype. We hate the French.
Not these
Yeah,
French guys, so not these.
If you hear this, new character, maybe melee alternate. So that's 3 for 3. Just like 3 or 3v3. I don't know what you do.
A whip.
Yeah, a more wider melee.
Yep, a whip
Something.
or a throwing axe, maybe.
The tamer is maybe the next robot.
Oh, what a hacker!
Maybe.
It would be a hacker in this case. Genuinely, that sounds pretty not bad. I mean, we'll talk about it in a moment. What we haven't talked about is just the nature of the game in its like the current state of the game, right? Because it's not finished. It's
Not
in
really
early.
even close by the looks of it. But
No.
I think it kind of is.
Well, I don't know. It's in early access, right? And I want to point this out. This is like this is an early access review. We're going to do this again after 1.0, because I think that'll be fair. This is an early access review, and the state of the game as it is at the moment is there's still like a lot of depth here. And there's a lot of replayability. That's even more than I thought. By the way, and I'll get into that. And yeah, there's obviously a lot of stuff they haven't done yet, right? You can look at any area of the game, right? Like the hub, we've got the area, the compendium, which is literally just like it would be under construction. That's basically how it is. You've got a lot of that stuff.
Hub was added on the winter update as well. Or at least they extended it more. I think they did like something.
Yeah. Anyway, what I was going to talk about is how polished it feels. Anyway, like what's there still feels extremely polished. Like up to the eyeballs. Except actually when you get to the city, and I think you noticed this as well. Those little areas that you can go in. the rooms with the doors.
Yeah.
Those areas feel unfinished, like straight up. And then
Yeah.
up until that point, I'd gotten this impression that, like, obviously they haven't added everything they want to yet, but everything that's there is like extremely polished and done, right?
Essentially, they won't touch when they are working on the new set of stuff. Right?
Yeah,
It's
but there
all
was still that, and obviously, I don't really want to make this criticism because it's actually it's actually the opposite. I'm just saying I noticed it after a while, but it would have been unreasonable to expect any of that from the beginning. It's just they set a really good precedent of having everything there be so polished that it kind of surprised me when there was some areas later on that didn't feel as polished.
When we entered the Haven City or whatever, right? We started feeling like, okay, all right, we're approaching the end here, and then
Well,
obviously
we thought we were approaching. You kind of thought that the energy center might have been the last stage anyway, and then we went to the Haven City, so and then we heard the music, which was like, okay, I think this is the finale, right? And then we were like, because we kind of finished it, or like we thought we finished it. We thought, okay, nothing happened, so is it just over? And then we found out, okay, no, because we beat all the mini bosses, so we could go to the corrupted city. It's like, okay, it's another one.
It's probably going to be quite similar to Hades in the end, because I mean, think about it, right? You got like 2 stages and then a boss, 2 stages and then a boss, and then another 2 stages and then a boss. That's like Megara and the Furies. The second floor.
Bone Hydra.
Bone Hydra, or Lerny, which was the worst name in the world. And then
the twins. No, I mean Asterius and Theseus.
Yeah. And then you have like the next floor, but you don't technically get really boss fight until Hades, right? That kind of thing. It might be that is the next point. So we would kill this boss.
So you think the next stage might just be a boss fight?
I don't know, not inherently, but I think it might. Like, really, the point of it is to get you ready for the final boss, kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like the final stage of fighting all the rats and that. It's not normal. It's not like the other ones, is it?
No, that's actually a good point. I didn't think about that. Like, there's a very distinct change in almost like the level structure of the stages once you get to that point, right?
Yeah.
And in Hades, you have this sort of mini hub that you come back to, and you go off in all different the different separate paths to find the Satyr sack. But there
already is a difference in stage, right? And that's the interesting thing, is that it switches from just getting through the missions to hunting down 4 bosses and then completing 2 purple rooms. Which purple rooms weirds me out a little bit. Like it doesn't sit right with me. That it feels like it's side extra content and not like things you need to do to progress through the game. But that might be just for now, or that might be forever. But
we talked about that's a bit. If you want to draw more comparisons to Hades, it's like the Erebus gates. Suppose.
Yeah, it was like if you had to complete 2 Erebus gates to get to Hades.
Sorry. Are you talking about the corrupted city specifically?
Yeah.
Where it's kind of you just do 2 of those that were previously side objectives. Yeah, I think there probably are actually 2 mini bosses there that are supposed to be there. Maybe.
Yeah, because once again, I think we're very much rubbing up against the edge of what they were wanting to do. Like they knew that they wanted to get that far, but they also, they're probably running out of time or wanting to get it out.
Yeah, and there was this.
That they could come back to this.
Yeah, we were sort of speculating about how it was going to end in its current state, knowing that the game wasn't actually finished. Right? We thought, okay, so what's the actual last part going to be? And we were thinking, like, is it just going to end, like, just really unceremoniously, or will you get to the last door and it opens, and then you get an end screen or something, or it like says, under construction, and then the game ends or something. No, there is a final boss fight in the current version of the game, which was just a pleasant like surprise, not like a massive. Wasn't massively surprising, but it was still very pleasant to know.
And we were strong enough to kind of dispatch him easily.
Yeah, I mean, on the normal difficulty, we were.
Yeah.
Obviously, we'd done a lot. We'd upgraded quite a lot. There's probably people who finished the game before getting to the level of power we were at. There are probably people who finished it like with much less tiers of the workshop having gone through, because they're better than
Or
us.
played on lower difficulty.
Or played on low
I
difficulty,
know
which I
that
don't
Monkey
respect.
said he basically played it on the lower difficulty just so he could finish the game, and then like I don't know, play it again.
Yeah, I don't really
assume.
see the need for that because honestly, from a difficulty perspective, I think that normal difficulty is really, really good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's like a really that felt like a very, very reasonable starting point for difficulty. It did not feel too hard out the gate.
I think
And yet the challenge felt reasonable as it went on at the same time.
I think another game which I think is a roguelike or a roguelite is Risk of Rain or Risk of Rain 2 is probably more it's the more one-on-one. And that one has the kind of same thing. It has a difficulty thing, like easy, medium, and like hard. And medium is what it throws you in normally, but medium is fucking difficult, right? Like I played it quite a few times with me and Mitchell. We played it a little bit, me on my own. I mean, we played it. You would not remember it was so long ago. But medium is difficult as hell. Switched to easy mode, finished it that game, right? And if anything, it was preferable to do that because some of the characters you had to basically finish the game to unlock. So some games is preferable to do it on the easiest difficulty just to finish it because it will actually make the game easier in the long run because you'll unlock some other characters and know what you're getting into. I don't think Roboquest is one of those games.
Yeah, I never
think
felt the need to bring it down.
Yeah, the normal difficulty allowed you to progress at about the right speed. It felt, which
Yeah, it felt like as long as it wasn't like a blunder, we were getting slightly further every time. As long as we didn't just fuck up, ourselves.
like it was like like I mean we're comparing it quite a lot currently, which I mean maybe we might do a whole thing on it anyway. But like Hades, in that you kind of did really work your way through Hades at a pretty reasonable pace, right? Like
Hey,
you
well,
would.
I mean, I want to talk about Hades just for a quick moment. I want to say something about Hades to just make sure my position is made clear. I almost think Hades is like the best game ever made. Almost. And like people might say that's like wild, but it's just like, okay, what's your candidate?
Yeah.
That's what I ask. It's like, do you actually, and is it going to impress me as much? Probably not.
Hades was that I really can't pinpoint a flaw.
No, that's what I mean. The only reason I don't think it's actually like the best game ever made, because I feel like the best game ever made needs to be perfect in every way. I don't like the story is actually quite good. I just don't enjoy the dialogue that much. Not even that the voice actors are doing a bad job. I can't say I enjoy listening to the dialogue, to be honest. That's the only problem I have with Hades. Yeah, some of it's not bad. I like Skelly quite a lot. I like the gods too. I wasn't huge on the actual conversations, to be honest. I like like when the gods talk to you, like especially when you have to choose between the two those sections. You have to choose between the two gods, and that the other one's just always spiteful because that's just how they are. It's just like, come on, man, I had to choose, and then it's just a dick. I like that kind of thing. I like that, but yeah, Hades is like close to like the perfect game, and it had an early access phase as well. But I only played it when it was like completely finished. I don't think there've been any updates after I started playing. So it had a really good first impression, and it was like perfect, like all the way through to the end. And I'm still playing it, by the way, because there's a lot to get through, and I don't think I didn't really 100% like the normal mode, but I got I did pretty much realistically I did everything. I think I did all of the prophecies. The prophecies are like the in-game like achievements where you go down the list. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. I think I did all of those, and I was like, okay, I've got like this hell mode unlocked. I'm going to do that like now, so I'm doing that as well. Anyway, I kind of got off track there. There was a point to this, wasn't there? When you brought up Hades.
I can't remember.
Shit.
Yeah.
Oh god, there was one thing I was going to say though. Oh yeah, well I think we were talking about difficulty. And we have started playing on the harder difficulty, Heroes 1. And that's sort of it, is you have these Heroes difficulties. And there was Heroes 1, and then we unlocked Heroes 2 after beating the game on normal difficulty.
No, I think we unlocked Heroes +1.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh,
There was
okay.
heroes, and then we unlocked heroes plus
Shit.
one.
Okay. I only bring this up right because I checked out the Roboquest subreddit earlier because I thought, okay, is this going to be worth sharing? And I think it will. I want to see what they make of it. At the same time, I went on there, 500 members. Shit, I just knocked my earphones out. 500 members, 4 online.
Yeah.
And this was one of the things that I was sort of thinking about when it came to just talking about this game on the channel. Was just like, it's not very well known at the moment, and I have no problems with talking about it. But you know, it's not going to bring a lot of people in, and we're not really going to give it that meaningful for publicity either. That's the thing. Which is just not that that's going to necessarily prevent anything. I think we'll talk about Roboquest as much as we feel like we should. But it's still an interesting thing to think about, right? It's just like what's gonna cause this game to blow up in the way that it deserves, like Deep Rock did, because like it's a similar situation. Our journey with the games, the 2 games, Roboquest and Deep Rock, where we jumped on board in an early access time period. I think Roboquest is a lot closer to 1.0 than Deep Rock was when we first started playing Deep Rock, but these 2 games that we both started playing before their official 1.0 release, we can sort of see that progression. And it's what it's going to take, because Roboquest is like, it's got incredibly satisfying gameplay. It's got a really good sort of just sense of. It's just got really good sensibilities in creating just a satisfying experience. It just gets it incredibly right, like just consistently. And I just don't know what it takes for something like that to get the attention it deserves. Like, how does something blow up? Because I know it's not going to be because we're talking about it. Just, I don't know. But what I was going to say about what I saw on the Reddit was people do talk about builds a bit. There was a couple of people that shared some build videos. I saw one that said, I think it was engineer build for Heroes 6. That's what I saw.
Yeah, I literally, because I whipped it up to just have a look at it as well. First of all, they have a dev post about what they're working on right now. They posted 2 months ago, and this was 2 months after the winter update, which is pretty fucking nice. Probably shouldn't look at it now, but it's got some good shit on there. But yeah, I see that there's like a Heroes 6, and they got S rank and stuff like that. There's obviously a community here already, like forming. So I don't know. It is annoying that we're not big enough to really expose it that much, but there's got to be a start somewhere.
Yeah, I mean,
And I'll be down for us helping as much as we can, because honestly, this is I wouldn't say the next Deep Rock, because I think there might be more to Deep Rock than just it being a good game, which Roboquest is a good game. It's probably going to be just as good as Deep Rock is. But I'm not sure if it has the same appeal as Deep Rock to the point where it'll ever blow up.
Deep Rock has these sort of very specific like facets of itself that are designed to essentially take root in culture almost, or like potentially. And you might know exactly what I'm talking about. Literally, that I'm talking about Rock and Stone, by the way. Literally, there's this very distinct slogan that you can bring up, right? There's this I suppose it's literally the idea of like voices and the game having a voice, and therefore what that voice says is like Rock and Stone, and that's like that's how its voice is carried over through the community. What can like Roboquest players say or do that's going to be immediately recognizable, and it's something that can spread? Rock and Stone almost became a way for people to like identify each other outside of like the Deep Rock forums, outside the game. Like what does is Roboquest? I don't really see it laying those same seeds. I think they definitely like Ghost Ship definitely had some good ideas from the start on how to like get their game to take root and grow. Ghost Ship Rise Up, I see what they're just trying to make a really fantastic game, and that's absolutely respectable, but there is more that can be done. I think because I think Ghost Ship did more than just that to get their game to become popular. Yeah. So
it's your characters don't have any inherent personality. Like I get that maybe they want to go the silent protagonist route, but maybe some sort of robot sounds, just something like that.
Well,
Um,
they're not doing that either because the game doesn't have a protagonist in that sense. Um, and what I mean by that is silent protagonist works when it's like it's a story for that silent protagonist to journey through, and you see their personality come through in the decisions that they make. There's no narrative decisions being made by the silent protagonist, right? Like you have Doom Guy in the Doom games going through a story, going to different locations, interacting with different characters, and he's still a silent protagonist, but his personality still comes through because he has to do things basically as
yeah,
part of a story, and you don't get that when it's a roguelite, basically. That's what I mean, and yeah. So you kind of do need you do need to do something else, and I guess they just don't have voice acting, and games that don't have voice acting don't tend to give the player character really any dialogue either, right? That's a pretty common thing. If you look at pretty much most JRPGs, right, which are usually just use text based dialogue, 90% of the dialogue, or even probably more, is going to come from other characters. Because if they're not doing voice acting just across the board, then they'll usually avoid giving the player character like any kind of voice. That usually just works better in terms of like inserting yourself into them, I guess. So I don't really know what they can do. I don't really know what they want to do in regards to that. Part of it could just be luck. I feel like oftentimes games that are genuinely great do end up getting the attention they deserve, though. It kind of just
yeah.
happens
I mean, some
because
people already
someone
have.
will see it. A big YouTuber will probably just play it and be like, "This game is great." That will probably just happen at some point, and then it will sort of just spiral from there, I guess. And that's sort of, I guess that will be its sort of life, I suppose.
Yeah,
But I was still saying something about difficulty. I was just saying this just even in its current early access stage. And, it's not that the game doesn't have a lot to offer already. I just only bring that up because there's still a lot more they want to do, which is very respectable. But it's just like, even then, there's still a lot of replay value here, especially, like, I assume it ends at 6, though, the difficulties. It must do, if that's the ones that people are making videos on, right?
it looks
That's got to be like
it.
the top of it. That's like top of the line. See, they got Hazard 6. See? Yeah. Anyway, so I don't actually have like a ton more to say about the game. We haven't really talked about enemies, to be fair, like bosses and how they.
Yeah,
Like the game, it feels very satisfying to shoot. Feels very satisfying to kill things, but it's not like the most. I don't know how to describe it. I often think of like the most satisfying games. They often involve a lot of. They do often involve gore, right? Because there's this inherent satisfaction in. It's gonna sound a bit weird. In like dismemberment, right? And ragdolls. Like this is just the thing. This is one of the best things about Deep Rock. It's sort of the blood effects and like the way enemy bodies ragdoll and whatnot and the feedback. Roboquest is all robots, and yet there's a similar level of satisfaction, if not more so. They really need to like make killing things really satisfying as well, because you've got to do it a lot. That's pretty much all you're doing, and it's impressively satisfying. You wouldn't expect it to be as satisfying as it actually is. But it is. Maybe you're just a bit cursed with Deep Rock's robots. I don't know. Maybe they sort of.
no, I think no, they make the robots in this game feel slightly squidgy. I don't know
Yeah.
if they're not quite the shooting a metal wall that Deep Rock's ones are. Um, they are they're good. They're fine. They have somewhat personality to some of them. Like
The bosses, I think,
Irovino
have personality.
one of my least favorite ones, right? Like like in Deep Rock. I know the mine spewer stationary turret can go fuck himself. I hate that thing so
I have a bit
goddamn
of a
much.
problem with the guys that have these like breach cutter like weapons, like
Yeah, the
guns,
breach
and
cutter
the
guys.
ones with the chains as well. Only because I often can't see them. I'm like,
And
what the fuck?
obviously we got like the Roboquest Nemesis, like the big flying robot guy, which in all fairness has proved less of an issue as of recent, but
Because we've
definitely
been getting
was.
stronger because of the power creep. Like,
Yeah, yeah, and I guess the power creep is to be slightly petered out by doing uh, the terms for it is
What Heroes?
Hero 6, right?
Yeah, well,
Um,
Big Hero 6. Well, I suppose because we're gonna plateau, probably not. It's probably not too far off. We're gonna get all the workshop upgrades. Is what I mean, and then you can't really go much further than that. And then I don't know how much. I don't know what point it can carry you through. I assume we're probably gonna get to a stage where we might end up finding the first heroes easy, but that's probably the best it's gonna get. I reckon. That's the thing. I can't see anything above the first hero's difficulty being like easy at all. But it's just going to keep getting harder and harder, and then you sort of just start hitting this brick wall. So I'm definitely interested to see where the line between the game getting more difficult and where the power creep stops. I'm interested to see how much of a space between those two things there is. How much more difficult does it get after you've plateaued in power? Is what I'm interested to see. Because that's something we can still see. That's something we still haven't really experienced in this game yet. I wouldn't say we've gotten everything out of it we can yet. We only got to the very end like yesterday. To be fair,
yeah, we played a good bit before that. We've only actually finished the game once, which I assume compared to the people probably on this Reddit is pretty pitiful.
Hey, look, man, I always feel bad. I always feel bad playing this game for free as well. Like, in its current state, this is worth money, in my opinion. This is worth what Deep Rock was worth when we bought it, at least.
Do you actually know the price?
I guess I can see the Steam price out of my Xbox at the moment. Actually, they did actually adjust the price recently. Doesn't actually mention the numbers, though. It's like £16.75. That's not bad at all.
Yeah, I mean, as it stands, that is how much it's probably worth because it isn't finished, but it is still a very good game and is quite replayable, and it has a good amount of playability even before you would have to want to replay it, right?
I want to bring it up.
Game
carry on.
Replayable, you would need to finish it. Right? Like a game isn't replayable if you never actually get to the finish line. So it is, and the fact that we have finished it, I think we're both looking at playing it again still. It's a very replayable game. It's definitely worth the money. But it is free on Xbox Ultimate. It's pretty nice. But yeah, what were you gonna say, Harry?
Mamma mia, can't remember. Well, obviously we haven't reviewed a game before, so I don't know how we want to end the review. So I was thinking, do we want to give it a rating? Or is that even fair? Well, okay, so here's what I'm going to do. We are going to do this again, because I want to do it after 1.0 as well. I want to talk about the game after 1.0 as well. So I don't know if we can give a rating. I still could, basically. I could still give a rating. Why not?
Because I think we're not going to bother talking about a game that isn't maybe not inherently 10 out of 10, because I don't even say Deep Rock's a 10 out of 10, but like 8 to 10, right? We wouldn't bother talking about anything that isn't in that territory. And we're not going to talk about any shit games we play, right? I don't think we're going to go that far. So I think we would put it more under the category of Barrel Vision approved, essentially. You know what I mean? That it's of a good enough quality that we genuinely think it's around a Deep Rock level, I guess is what we would put it as. It's primarily a Deep Rock channel. It's as other players that enjoy Deep Rock, we genuinely think that you would like and enjoy Roboquest.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, it's not. I don't think that's the only pipeline. I think there's plenty of other games that you could enjoy that could also be tangentially. That enjoyment could spin out to Roboquest as well. But if I hadn't ever played Deep Rock, I probably would still enjoy Roboquest because of other things like Borderlands. I say, to me, Roboquest is, if I had to. Because I do this often, and I think it is arbitrary, right? It's arbitrary, but it's still an interesting sort of just thought exercise of just take a given piece of media, what two things combined together is it most like, right? I did sort in my head for like bands and stuff. It's kind of weird, but like games, it's like, you know, obviously this came from us starting a Deep Rock YouTube channel. We probably wouldn't have heard of it if Monkey didn't tell us about it. But to me, it's like, and this might be very simplistic, it's just like a mix between Borderlands and Hades. That's just how I see it, because Hades is the roguelite I have the most experience with, and it's also got a lot. You know, it's very Borderlands-like in its presentation and stuff like that. So
I think there's probably a more apt roguelike to compare it to. I think Hades is probably about as far away as you can get from this, as far as roguelikes are concerned, but it's definitely an iconic one.
well, I'm sort of talking about like, you know, almost like pinnacles of like the roguelite and like looter shooters. It's sort of just like smash them together. You know, it's not. I wouldn't call Roboquest a combination of just another FPS roguelite with something else. That seems a bit, because it's like, it's, you know, it's not like Gunfire Reborn mixed with Borderlands. It's just like Gunfire Reborn but different. Really, it's not like Gunfire Reborn mixed with something else.
And I think maybe I was about to say Titanfall, but probably not Titanfall. But I think the something we actually haven't mentioned, which is important, mobility of this game and how vertical it is a very weird creative decision, which I think ultimately pays off. It makes it quite unique, but it's still weird. Like, you could have easily have made this game without the jumping on rails, the higher plateau above the linear level, and like shit like that, right? And like double jumps. Easily, you could have made this game a very linear experience, but they didn't. And I think that is another credit.
There's so many places that you could go where it's like this. I feel like, you know, most other games would put invisible barriers here, right?
Yeah.
Which, you know, I this is just a weird tangent, but I never think about the fact that Deep Rock doesn't have invisible barriers, right? Because it's just a completely naturally enclosed space at every given time. So that's just an interesting credit to give Deep Rock. A very smart decision. But yeah, the fact that Roboquest is just like, fuck it, don't need them. Just go where you want.
Get there, you can get there.
Yes. I really appreciate that. Reminds me of Halo 2.
I did fall out of the map, but I don't think that was, honestly, I think it was just that I disconnected from the game as we went through a door, so I fell through the world and then reconnected to the game, and I was outside the map and it spawned me outside the map. That's what I think occurred there. And that's really the only glitch we have ever seen in the game, and I'm pretty sure it was because of my shitty...
That's what I mean about it being polished as well, right? Because it is very, very polished. Like, these guys clearly, you know... to be fair, right, I did point out how we're definitely much closer to this game 1.0 than Deep Rock was when we started playing it. But Deep Rock was way more unstable. It's arguably more unstable now, even. You know, that's just kind of interesting. And this is more of a credit to Roboquest, by the way, just how it does feel like a very polished game, and it's probably only going to get more and more polished. And, you know, there'll be more content that comes, and it will also... that will probably also be extremely polished. It's weird. I just have this it's inherent sort of dedication as well to just sort of just being like fun. It doesn't, you know, obviously it's designed to be challenging, certainly, but it's not it doesn't feel like anything in there is really designed to limit your fun. You know, there's no like restrictions placed on that kind of thing. There's no invisible barriers or anything like that. You know, they added this concept of like head bonking, right, which is just jumping on top of enemies. You know, it's just like, which is kind of thing of games that kind of just forgot. They probably, I feel like most developers see that as sort of like a primitive form of combat for their games. It's like, that's just that's just for Mario, that's just for 2D games, right? Not even a lot of 2D side-scrollers don't do that. You know, I mean, Cuphead did, but
it just feels like
just like, why not? You know,
you can like go anywhere and do anything to most enemies, right? It has that kind of freedom to it for the time. And I don't know, it's interesting. It's a very interesting game, which is obviously yet to get 1.0. I would assume that even when 1.0 comes out, they might still add stuff, but they also might not.
I don't think they would have to be honest.
It's never a bad shout in this day and age to have a live service game.
Well, that's the thing. That's only because of the way things are now, especially because, right. And this is kind of, I guess, I don't know if this is sad or not. It might end up being quite sad. I just mean, like, games probably don't make as much money as they used to. They don't make as much money as they used to from sales, certainly, because sales aren't as much of a thing anymore because of things like Game Pass. So it's the only real business model that works now is playing, having like a long-term plan, and that includes monetization. There's no monetization in Roboquest. There's none.
Yeah, it's keeping people interested in your game for longer, so they're willing to spend money in other ways, or
But
other things are willing to spend
But
money
if they
on
don't want to do that, I don't mind. If they are just dedicated to making this just little capsule of a game that may or may not attract a lot of attention, but they don't want to do anything more of it. They just want to make a singular experience that's just complete. That's fine by me. I'd love to see that.
I don't think this is the only thing they're working on either. If I go back to their YouTube channel, they basically say we are developing our own innovative IPs for VR and standard games. We are also providing outsourcing services for art and game design to other international studios. So they're like kind of mixed up. Plus, the thumbnail of their thing is Roboquest and another game there, which I think can't really see on their videos. It might be an older game. I mean, yeah. I mean, they only actually ever post about Roboquest on this channel. They're probably more than just the YouTube channel. The Burning Descent is I think their other game, maybe.
Oh,
The video on it. Trailer Team Vitality. I don't know. Is that they're not only working Roboquest, and maybe that it's going to be that kind of game company that will make these little games that hold on their own, and then they'll make a new game that holds on their own. Like a Hades or whoever makes those kind of games. Those games.
Yeah, that is what Supergiant does. They don't have any kind of DLC. Which, by the way, something like Hades is the kind of game that could absolutely justify story DLC as well. Actually, just adding, essentially just doing more of the game, which I guess they're doing in the form of Hades too. But until then, probably get this 1.0 before Hades 2, I imagine. I mean, that's the only thing they have planned. Like, you look at the roadmap, it's just like 2023 1.0 release, But there's a lot they got planned for that as well. And we'll talk about that later. Well, we'll review it again afterwards, and I think we'll definitely play it at least on stream. Right, I don't even know if you want to do like actual videos. Like this is Roboquest 1.0. They got like a lot of stuff planned. It's like just a shit ton of quality of life stuff, like the compendium being something as well that they're actually gonna do
that was on
more story. All of this quality of life stuff, like game textures and whatnot.
Actually, have an image of what the compendium will look like. Post.
Yeah. They have lots also just, on top of that, it's a shit ton of gameplay stuff like the corrupted levels, which they're just sort of teased in game. The actual final boss. They've actually got
maybe we could play the final boss music because that's something
that's the only thing they have for it as well. They didn't say anything about it except the music. So hold on, I don't know if it's right. It's coming through on the recording. Well, I don't know, a bit like sort of I don't know how much we're allowed to play. Only like 12 seconds. I'm going to skip like 2 minutes in. Because we haven't even talked about the music yet.
Yeah, well, that's why I thought get a bit in there.
And all I want to say about the music is it's just, I don't know, it's just fucking amazing. I don't know.
The final boss is called Iris.
Wow.
Because
big eye.
The the text before that is actually like a spoiler text, which is in binary, and I just looked it up, and it has it there. Quite cool.
Oh. Yeah. Anyway, so the music is just it's just like I don't know. It's just head banging constantly. That's the thing.
It goes hard.
It does just go hard. Obviously, you have the more chill music in the loading screens, and that's it. I will say there's no sort of real tonal. It's sort of like a very one tone kind of game though. It's just like constant like head banging action, but it's not but in a sort of cartoony sense too. It's not like ridiculous over the top like metal like goriness. It's like sort of a cartoonish, but it's still like a lot of like fun, sort of constant headbanging music.
It only ever feels like slightly weird if you like cool down, essentially. Like if you're like whenever, I don't know, like you're waiting around for like your teammate to revive themselves, or someone goes mid game, wink wink no Sarge Harry, you're sitting there and you're like,
What?
nothing is happening and the music is going so hard. Like when things are happening, when you're just playing the game, it fits it perfectly. But the second you kind of slow it down a little bit or stop, it's like, okay, this is it's a bit much. But obviously, you're not really supposed to just stop. You're supposed to play, which I guess the
No, and
music
that's
encouraged.
fine. It's definitely not criticism. It's just like I I do like this kind of thing. It's just, but I also do like games that understand that quiet moments have value as well.
I think
Which
it does
obviously
get
Deep Rock
does
does.
simmer down. It's where it simmers down when you go into like the healing room with Max or whatever, or like you're leveling up your skills. I swear it like at least like quiets it down. Maybe not like slows it down.
It's also really good at doing the transitions of music as well. On me, like when you open the door,
Yeah,
right? So then, no matter where you're at, it very smoothly transitions into the actual main combat music. It's
the
really
boss music
impressive.
is pretty key.
I like the boss music. It's actually slightly less like um fast, obviously. Like it's yeah, I don't know. The boss music's
It
great too.
knows to be slow at the beginning because it starts as soon as you walk into like the prepare room. And like it quite often just about gets it dead on. As soon as you open that door, it drops.
Yeah, the
It's
boss
like the
are great
exact right
too. By
time.
the way, I think the boss fights are actually really fun. Like I think the boss fights are like they're sometimes quite challenging. Some of them edge on a bit of a bullet hell, but they're also always very easy to understand. I've never felt like the boss fights are too.
They
They don't just
normally,
like they don't just come at you like one hit attacks like just instantly. It's like what the
yeah,
fuck's going on
they're
here?
normally a gimmick, which is not in a bad way, but it's like the worm one right on the rails. Like they were like, let's have this boss fight occur on the rails, and that's kind of the gimmick of the
Well, they
fight.
all have like personality as well, like and like very distinct features, like Diggy Mole. I like the
Yeah,
names too, or Billy Boom, or the what's the Judge Ball? It's
almost,
El
almost.
Mosquito. I love El Mosquito and Beetle Royale. Those are my favourites.
I was
It's
like all of them, right?
no
It's
those.
actually, I
I meant
think
those
there's a
two. I
boss.
mean El Mosquito and Beetle Royale. Not
All right.
yeah.
I think there might be one we haven't encountered yet. I'm not sure.
Well, there's one we
Do we
didn't
not have
mention there, isn't there?
Well, I think there. The thing is, I thought that there was three tier two bosses, but it might actually just be that the one that I saw in like a video on the channel was like the beta royale. So I think there might just be like three, two, one essentially to work your way through the game.
Yeah.
But either way, yeah, it's pretty cool. They're pretty yeah, they're pretty simple boss fights, but in a good way. You know where their weak point is, you know what attack they're doing just by gameplay knowledge, right? Like when the Diggy Mole starts charging towards you, you know he's charging towards you, essentially, right? Like you know
Yeah,
he's not
but the
gonna
thing is,
fucking jump
hold
or
on. There's
something.
something we still haven't done, like in the game, which is let Billy Boom explode. When it's
Yeah,
like, I don't know why we
I keep
would,
turning him off.
but is that like an automatic lose thing or something? We don't know because when did it happen? I don't want to. I don't want to end the
Probably isn't
run.
an automatic lose, but I imagine it's like a huge fucking explosion that will like damn near kill you. I imagine at the very least, if you're even at your full health. At least I hope that's what it is.
Yeah,
Because it's pretty easy to solve. Like it's just instinctually, as soon as you like I saw that, I keep turning it off. So yeah,
yeah.
there are
Uh,
plenty of parts of the game we haven't really done. There's still weapons that we forget exist that just like
There's
fall
like a
into.
weapon that I pretty much saw for the first time yesterday, actually, which is really
Yeah,
weird. I think it's like the militia rifle or something, like a couple of ones. And it's something you don't see too often. And even then, they got way more stuff planned as well, like more weapons, for example. They've also got way more gadgets planned. Apparently, they're planning on making a system where you can actually have as many gadgets as you want equipped. So done it, and they acknowledge that sounds ridiculous in terms of balancing, but they're sort of like they know, but they want to do it somehow still, right? And all this other stuff like elite enemies, apparently. Um, I think we still kind of have, but they want to like do them better or something.
Quest.
Yeah, Quest, New Game Plus, which is the thing. I don't know what that is, especially when we've got like multiple difficulties after like the first one. Like,
I think
I think
that's what
new,
they talk about.
but yeah, it's basically what Heroes Plus difficulties are at the moment, right? Except you would actually restart the game. That is like Hades Hell mode, basically. Tutorial. I don't know what corruption crystals are, but they're not telling us. More NPCs and quests and secrets, another class, enemies and weapons, just all this shit. It's gonna be fire.
I mean, that new
Fire.
class is clearly some sort of like magician guy, right? I mean,
Oh, I didn't even really acknowledge that. Maybe that is his actual silhouette, not just a placeholder. Maybe, yeah,
like,
yeah.
he looks he's either a magician or cocky or both.
There's telekinesis to inflict testicular torsion on the Billy Boom.
Yeah, yeah. They're changing what's in the game and adding more. And there's several things that aren't on the list. Yeah. I don't know. Basically, yeah, this is a game like Deep Rock, and like if you never experienced Deep Rock before it launched, we recommend you hopping on the Roboquest train because it's always a nice, cool time being a part of a somewhat smaller game that hasn't even come out yet, which you can trust will be good.
Yeah.
It's a nice feeling. We recommend it.
I mean, I hope it's a good future. It's definitely going to have at least a bit of a future on our channel, right? Because, for example, I mean, maybe we can finalize this now. The next feature thief.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially because I definitely want it to be a mix of. That's why I want to try another one of those, obviously. But I also definitely want it to be a mix of like really popular, obvious stuff, and also stuff like this as well. I mean, I don't know how many games like this there would end up being in that series, but this is like an obvious contender, right? As in the pipeline, or like, you know, you can easily see where it might go. They're very adjacent games as well. They fit perfectly. It's just obviously a lot of people don't know about Roboquest, and I'd love to do it. But then the next one, for example, would be something like far more popular. You know? So we're going to do that, and we're definitely going to talk about it more around the 1.0 release. Probably do another podcast episode on that, and we'll continue to play it every now and then on streams as well. It's definitely got a future for us, and I hope it has a really good future for itself. I want to briefly, and we don't really have to have this conversation necessarily, but I still want to bring it up about, because we've touched on Overwatch a little bit, and honestly, I can honestly say I've already had a pretty decent Overwatch PvE experience. If you remember,
Did you play that with us?
yeah, I did. And it was a lot of fun. There's this Overwatch custom game that's like, it's just like a roguelike, and that is a roguelike, isn't it? Right? Yeah, like straight up. And you fight. That was really weird and fun and interesting, and I actually enjoyed that way more than I've enjoyed like the Overwatch PvP experience. Not that I actually hate that, by the way. I don't hate Overwatch. And I only bring that up because, and like I said, we don't have to have this conversation, but how do you feel about Deep Rock doing something similar? And whether or not it would fit in at all.
Overwatch.
Like the Overwatch custom game.
Would you just customize your own mission?
No, like the Overwatch roguelike custom game.
Right, so roguelike.
Yeah, a roguelike mode in Deep Rock, like that.
I think, once again, I mean, there'll come a point in time where you don't want or need actual content to the actual game, and I see no reason why they can't add, like, essentially arcade modes, like a Endless Swarm timing one, or, like, you know, see how long you can survive, or a roguelike one where it leans into the, I don't know, like, dwarven, like, RPG elements, stuff like that. Like, I see no reason why there won't be a point in time where they can just do that. Just dick around with the game essentially because it's
And
done.
you could essentially start as a template, and you could get random weapons, and you could end up with weapon combinations that you wouldn't normally be able to have as well.
Yeah.
I don't think it's not entirely unsuited for it, is it? You know, it might be in part suited to it. Anyway, I think that it's a perfect place to stop. So let's stop. Let's stop. If you enjoyed this, please make sure to obviously like, subscribe. Subscribe to our Patreon. Wait, what? Shit. We have one of those.
Why would you even say that if we don't have one?
Feel free to find us and send us money.
Yeah.
Imagine someone just did that somehow. Like they wired funds to like our accounts. It's like, it's for you,
Be more
pumpkin.
concerning than anything.
It would be far more concerning than anything else. And obviously, I would hope that, I hope that people, watch this, and if they do, most of them probably haven't played Roboquest.
Again, I mean, yeah, it was, what was it, 16 something quid on Steam, and free on Game Pass on Xbox. It's not on PlayStation, it doesn't seem, or Switch, any of that shit. Not on the 3DS.
I think we can both pretty confidently give it like a hard recommendation, right, with no real hesitation. So like, this is worth playing.
Actually, I mean,
it's worth playing. It's worth buying.
It's 1 to 2 players, which is an interesting.
Yeah, we didn't talk about the player count actually.
It is literally that one. It's like they see the value in having just a friend there. Essentially, it feels right, but also the value in a game being able to be played on your own, and that's just middle ground.
I have been playing a bit on my own, but that 2-player thing, as in it's like the cap is 2 players, that makes it feel so much more like you should be playing it that way than anything else, right? Deep Rock is obviously a co-op game, right? But you can't always have 4 people, and 2 certainly doesn't always feel like enough. So I'm very satisfied playing lots of Deep Rock on my own. But like 2 is much easier to get a hold of, so it feels much more right. Yeah, it's definitely better that way. But I can still very much so enjoy it on my own. So either way, don't worry, right? But even then, you only need one other person. So get it. We're not, we're not being paid. If we were, that's the thing. Even if we weren't, and we aren't, we would say this anyway. It would still, it would still be true, even if we were being paid, that this game is good. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Right.
Honestly, play Roboquest. That's the moral of this podcast.
All right, I'm going to end this at 2:02:02. So give me 7 seconds. All right.
Okay.
All right. Take care, guys.